Good morning. Good morning, lovely people. I'm Marc J Acquaviva, the Acquaviva School of Yoga, and this is your weekly Yoga Solutions live on this lovely autumn Tuesday, the 17th of September, 2019. Very slightly different format today because, I haven't been getting a lot of live questions from people. So what I did this time was I'm responding to a private client who did a one-to-one with me, and she, after her session and a few light bulbs going on, she sent me a question about these ideas around the spine. And there are a lot of conflicting ideas about the spine out there, and the scaravelli inspired thing seems to be oppositional to whatever everyone's saying. So the way it's being treated, as if it is as if the thing that most people think of around how to manage the spine, things like opening the lumbars and neck and all the rest of it, is being considered to be oppositional to the scaravelli-inspired idea of giving back to the spine so that it can release. Now, if you've ever had that experience, if you are sort of if you've been working in the scaravelli-inspired way and you've got a good teacher, then you will understand this principle. Because it is entirely understandable on an experiential level. On an intellectual level, it's really quite tricky because the way we think about the body is ridiculously mechanistic, and it's not. And I can't emphasize this enough. The body isn't moved by muscles and pulleys and levers. The body is moved by the fact that there is a person inside the body with intention. And it's the intention that fires off whole patterns of movement that are nothing to do with specific muscles going on, antagonist, agonist, all that sort of thing. So it's so much more to do with the person's relationship to what they are doing, that it's their relationship to what they're doing that defines how their body responds. I'll just let that sink in. Okay? It's not muscles firing off randomly for their own purpose to stabilize this and to stretch that and whatever. It is a person within the body deciding to move in a particular way in response to what is going on around them. I'll give you an example. Say someone is coming at you very fast, okay? Now, and you don't recognize that person. So the mind might go into fear, and you might think that person is attacking you. So if they're coming to you like this, okay, and you have that response to them, your response to that person will be a kind of defensive one. So that if you don't recognize that person and you keep that image of this person coming at you, as they get closer, you'll get more and more defended in your physicality, okay? If, on the other hand, at some point as they come closer, you recognize that it's a very, very good friend, a long-lost friend, and they are coming to you with an open heart to give you a hug, right? Your physicality will shift entirely. And from a defended stance, you'll become open and in a receptive stance. And this is all physical responses, and it's to do with your relationship to the thing that's happening, okay? I think that's pretty clear. It feels different. You are using different muscles, and it depends on your relationship to the situation. It's the same in relationship to the body, okay? If you have the attitude that your spine, for example, needs protecting, then you will have the physicality that goes with protecting your spine. It'll be a fixed movement. It'll be frozen and held until you decide to move, in which case you have to let it go in some fashion. And then, yes, and it'll be, physicality. The musculature will go with the relationship that you have to the sensation of having your spine, okay? If, on the other hand, your relationship to it is that you understand that the spine is actually who you are, it's part of you, it is the central part of yourself, then you won't be in relationship to it, you will be it. And being your spine, you won't want to hold yourself tight. You won't want to you won't want to attack the spine to stretch it. Or whatever it feels like the spine is doing to you. It's not doing anything to you. It is responding directly to your relationship to the world around you, and through that to your sort of sensation of what's going on within the body. And your interpretations of what is going on kind of defines how your body responds. All right? So it seems a bit convoluted maybe. I think the first example was pretty obvious, but when we turn inwards and start looking at our bodies, instantly we become cross-eyed. We can't see the wood for the trees. And the reason is because by looking at the body from a sort of an outside position, you are instantly separating yourself from it and devising a relationship to it like it's not you. Now, this happens, so the thing that we need to do is refine our relation, understand this principle, and bottom line issue with the ideas around the spine. Okay, we have, why would it come around? Why would it come about, this idea that you need to stretch your back, for example? So, the body is intelligent, and say I come up to standing, I can't without losing the screen here, so let's just zoom out a little. So I come up to standing, and I have this idea of wanting to relax. So I relax into the ground, and the result is the spine will hold me up because I'm not relating to my support, if that makes any sense. I'm sort of, my relationship to my ground has become a passive one. So I'm not engaging with support. I'm trying to relax over my base. And the result is that there is no relationship. And because there's no relationship, my spine ends up carrying my weight, and my core ends up kind of collapsing towards the ground. If, on the other hand, we'll just take that scenario, okay, where there's no interactivity with the touch. There's simply the sensation of feeling the ground underneath you. And this is what most people think of as grounding, of sort of trying to release tension whilst feeling the fact of touching the ground. It's not how you actually get support. Because that's going on, I will be of the impression that my back is getting tight. It's getting tight because I'm giving it the job of supporting my body's weight and carrying the weight of the organs at the same time. So it's just doing its job. But because that's an uncomfortable thing, I will then want to forward bend, and can I do it here? Yes, I'll then want to forward bend and try and stretch my back. And of course, all I'm doing when I do that, when I pull on the same tissue that was busy holding me up, I mean, it's understandable because the muscles get tired. You want to relax those muscles, and that's fine, relax the muscles. But you don't want to stretch the tissue. Because if you succeed in making that tissue unduly long, what happens is you have even more absence of support when you come up. So you have to contract that tissue even more in the same way. Okay? It's a whole paradigm, it's a whole idea of what we need to do to support ourselves based on direct experience of essentially not involving ourselves in support. If we don't involve ourselves with the contact we make with the ground, then the spine will take the weight of it, and then we need to stretch. Okay, so we get very clever. We notice that the lumbar spine is holding our weight. So we decide, okay, well, let's see if we can change that situation, and we get into the idea of putting ourselves together with a core, so that we pull the front of the pelvis up towards the chest, and we pull the chest down towards the pelvis, and there is a new holding pattern along the front of the spine, which involves the pulling on the deep psoas muscles, and it's basically you holding your pelvis and pulling it down to the ground behind you so that you are levered up. At the same time, you have a compensatory pulling together at the front of you, so you're braced and held up. And this is the idea of the agonist and antagonist musculature of core support. So what you've got now is, instead of the spine carrying your weight, you've got your spine and a sort of compressive relationship to your organs also pulling together to carry your weight. And there's a pulleys and levers thing where there is tension behind you, there is tension in front of you. There is that you might be able to let go of the tension behind you in the lumbar spine, but it is replaced by tension in the hip flexors and the abdominal muscles. And if you're trying this, you'll feel it. There's an effort, and there's a holding pattern that pushes the thigh bones forwards and tilts the pelvis and holds it there. And you can get used to holding yourself up in that way instead of holding yourself up in this way. Now that is an attempt to hold the spine in place, and then in order to move you have to let go of support, so you end up moving with a collapsed spine. Okay, so, oh my god, what a mess. Can you see where I'm coming from? So what we've done, by first of all assuming that grounding is a relaxing thing, that where we give our weight to where we happen to feel the contact, and let go of tension, which makes you feel grounded, makes you feel like you're not holding yourself up, but you will be holding yourself up because you're not actually supporting yourself. So the body will be in shapes that means that muscles will have to pull to keep you together, and whatever shape that is, there will be holding pattern tension, and that's the experience. And then a whole paradigm, whole way of understanding the body is built up from that initial assumption that we shouldn't have to do anything. Okay, the initial assumption is actually quite correct, but I'm talking about, and I'm bringing it back to the original idea. The whole reason that this is going on is because instead of relating to our environment, which is basically my support is down there, we're relating inwards to ourselves and feeling what's going on and then trying to adjust it. So you end up not being in your body but holding it. Okay, you're controlling it you're either not controlling it and feeling the problems, or not controlling it and feeling the problems, depends on what your habit is. Or you notice the problems and then you try and control the body. And it's this relationship to it that causes the problems, because you're instantly separating yourself from the spine. Now, scaravelli-inspired yoga attempts, I think, to redress this fundamental issue of people separating themselves from their bodies in order to fix their bodies. It's that way of doing things is essentially an intellectual act, an act of being in your head. And people talk about mind-body. It should really be body-mind. The mind needs to immerse in the intelligence of the body in order to understand how to resolve complications, because the complications are mostly in the way the person relates to the world about them. Okay? This is the fundamental basis of my work. So if instead of arriving and trying to relax, we arrive and engage with our environment, so I'm starting to look for support from where I touch the ground. So I'm engaging down through my knees. I'm engaging down through the tips of the big toes. And the result is, instead of the musculature pulling me around to adjust the spine, I'm getting a relationship to the ground that can support me because I'm engaging with it. Now, this does involve muscles, but it's not the contrivance of pulling the spine around. In fact, what happens when I'm in this relationship to touch is because my spine and my core start to feel supported by the action of touch, then things that we understand from the mechanization of the body, as in core support, space within the core, and Uddiyana Bandha if you're a yoga teacher, the space that we derive in the center of our being, either from technique and holding patterns or from our relationship to the earth, that upward flying movement in the middle that goes with the downward action through our touch. When we start to find that relationship, there's no holding required. We don't have to pull the spine around. And the result is, instead of this binary problem of do I relax my pelvis or do I hold my pelvis so I can relax the spine, instead of that binary problem, we get a relationship where the pelvis is supported up through us because of our touch, along with the fluid core of the body. And then the spine itself, the sacrum, because of this movement within, gets a chance to release through to the touch of the knees. So instead of the spine having to hold itself up, it's directly planting through the earth. I'll do that again. There's a two-way relationship going on all the time. Of course there is. You can't you can't relate without there being two parts to it. There's a relationship between me and my earth. So the earth is pushing up through me, yes. And if that's all that happens, I do that. I personally do that. Other people do this. Okay. So if I get involved to meet the earth, if there's a relationship, and my intention, my relationship to that touch is simply to find support throughout my entire being, then as I engage with that relationship through the knees, through the big toes, I get responses because there is a response. I'm engaging, my body responds. And if the intention is to be supported through my joints, not supported by my efforts to hold myself up or down, then what happens is through the rhythms of breathing and my engagement, they start to unite, they start to work together. So that the downward touch supports the pelvis up through me, so I don't have to hold it down. Yeah? It supports the pelvis up through me. I just got reminded to switch my microphone on and off and on again. It supports the pelvis up through me, and it supports the spine, particularly with the release of the breath. Because of this change of the fluid core, it helps the spine rest forwards so it can drop down and relate directly to the touch. So essentially the spine is sort of going down whilst the body is coming up. So something is going down whilst something else is coming up. It's a coming together feeling. It's not a stretch feeling. Stretching is when you pull it apart. Stretching is when you try and pull apart the back of the waist, or where you try and pull apart the front of the waist. Okay, that's doing it to the spine. When you come together, you end up being through the spine. So whether you extend or flex becomes simply a choice, not a thing you do to yourself. Yeah? There's an example. So a way of experiencing this, most of you would have found that really difficult to experience. But I think the idea is clear. Instead of trying to pull the spine apart, Here's one I prepared earlier. Right? Instead of taking hold of this curve here and trying to pull it apart externally, which adds tension and actually disables the spine, well, instead of trying to lift with it and hold ourselves up, which creates holding patterns that makes us want to have to stretch in the first place, instead of putting our weight against that thing, instead of holding underneath it to pull on the spine, okay, what we need is to feel supported through it. We need the sense of support to travel through the axis of the spine. And then when the forces of support are traveling up through the spine gets a chance to relate down through touch. So it's the spine itself. The core response is the center of your being starts to relate through the body to the contact, so that you can express through space directly from the spine. I hope this is starting to make some sense. The way that you do that is not by pulling the spine apart, by pulling the spine around or pulling the joints apart even. If you pull the joints apart, you disable the potential to support yourself from the ground. You make the tissue around the joints weak. 1 second. So a lot of people complain about, especially in yoga, they complain about tight hips. And so what do they do? This particular joint feels restricted. Okay, and I'm telling you the reason that joint feels restricted is because you're busy working to either carry your weight with it, which makes it tight, or you're trying to do what you can to stretch it to try and pull it out. You know, and if you succeed, then you won't be able to walk, and we don't want to do that. Okay, what you need to do, if you want to remove, we have to remove conflict with ourselves, and looking at the body like it's a thing creates conflict. If you immerse the mind in the body and listen to its signals, you will understand that the hip will release when you stop pulling on it, when you stop trying to hold the pelvis in a particular direction. Yeah? So as long as you're doing those things, all those local muscles around the joints have to brace, because you're not actually looking for support through your joints. If, on the other hand, you work in a way that instead of pulling apart, it puts you back together, so the forces that you engage with support up through you, yeah? And you don't have to compensate anything. Yeah? When the forces of support come up through you, and when the fluid movements of the spine allow the sacrum to rest forwards through the pelvis, into that support. I'm not sure which way around to look at this. Okay, well, if you can think of a sort of a bag of fluid hanging off the spine. Sorry, it's a bit over flexible, this one. Think of the weight of the organs hanging off the spine. Okay, instead of the spine having to carry that either with heaviness, the weight pulling on the lumbars, or with effort, as in tilting the pelvis to hold it in place, as in pulling on the spine the other way. Instead of that, you've got a fluid breathing mechanism where the release of the breath can allow the breath to leave, of course, the diaphragm ascends within that as part of the thing. It's not the only thing that happens. And the fluid underneath it gets a chance to draw away from the ground, which takes the weight off the spine. So the chance that there's a potential for the sacrum to rest forwards through the pelvis, to rest forwards through the pelvis so that it can relate directly down through the bones. So I'm not sure that showed very well, but I'm trying to give you a visual that will make sense. So it's this act of, so maybe if I show my body, it'll be a bit more obvious. So, okay, now if you've sort of got that and you're using your X-ray specs a bit, when I do the thing that everyone does, everyone has been taught in Pilates, in yoga, all sorts of things, to flatten the back with an idea of stretching the tissue in the back, and then to flatten the neck with the idea of stretching the tissue in the neck, to basically trying to stretch the spine. There is a surreptitious effort that I can really feel it because I'm used to not doing that. But there's a surreptitious effort to hold the pelvis, to pull on the spine away from its axis so that it is suspended by the muscles of the thighs, the groins, and all the rest of it. So it's sort of basically disabling the spine and turning it into a passive hammock. And then when you stand up, you don't have any support because you're not through it. And then, of course, you do that, and then that gets a bit sore. You're sort of stretching the tissue, so you're disabling the spine, and then you're going to want to pull it back together again. So people then lift and do back bends from that lifting. So it's this binary idea of doing stuff to the body that is the complication. Now watch for a second. If instead of that, I'm relating to the touch of the feet, particularly with the release of the breath, the pelvis doesn't have to do anything. Instead, there is a release of pressure away from the base of the spine that means I don't have to hold the pelvis in a particular orientation. There's a release of pressure away from the pelvis that makes it lighter so that the sacrum within that can relate to the touch of the feet. So the sacrum within that can relate to the touch of the feet and can be given to the feet. At the other end of things, if I'm using my feet and supporting myself, it's not just down, it's down and pushing away from myself because I want to be supported up through me. And if I resist that at the pelvis, then all I'm doing is I'm trying to stretch the spine again. If, on the other hand, I let that space develop, I allow the space between me and my legs to develop so that there's a release of tension along the front, then when I push out through my feet, it can push up through my pelvis, up through my bones, up through my core, and up through my spine. So the spine is relating to the feet, and the feet are relating up through me. So basically, things come together. The spine comes together. It doesn't pull apart. And where I'm coming together towards is through the axis of the spine, towards the center of the dorsal curve, behind me here. And that is where we want to extend from. And that happens when we release the breath. If you're not busy carrying your weight with the lumbar spine or the hips. Okay? So I hope this is starting to make a little bit of sense. All I did was look at the lumbar spine so far. I'd like to show you the dorsal spine part, the rounded part of the back. That's the part that's kind of invisible to many people, and usually the only way they can get there is by hyperextending the lumbars and hyperextending the neck. Let me zoom in a little. Oh dear, his jaw's fallen off. Well, he'll have to suffer that. Let's do it this way around so it's less disturbing. Can I hook that in? No, I can't. Okay, we'll just put up with it. So, what people suffer from, let's take this off. Oh, I can't, it's all screwed in. Oh well. What people are worrying about in the neck is it's the same thing as what happens in the lumbars. They're used to pulling up with the muscles of the neck, which obviously shortens the space between the skull and the first thoracic vertebra. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then T1 is here, and that's the bump at the base of the neck. This general area here between C7 and T1. Okay, so people lift their heads, and then because of that, they get tired of that. The muscles get tired, and the spine feels compressed, and it actually can cause some problems around the base of the skull here with the cranial nerves. Yep, still working. And then, of course, same job, same idea. Because they're tight in the neck, they want to stretch the neck. So you do so by not holding the neck up, and then the tissue starts to open. But because we think in terms of stretch and doing stuff to the spine, and we've separated it from the neck and shoulders because the neck and shoulders feel tight, then we start to try and stretch. And we stretch the neck, and we stretch the neck, and we stretch the neck. And all that does is that weakens that space between the bump of the base of the neck and the head. The relief we get by letting go is simply that. We've stopped holding up. And that's fantastic. But unless you want to walk around like that for the rest of your life, it's not the thing it's not going to integrate your neck. Okay? The thing that we need for this problem of holding your neck up is for the head to feel supported from underneath. Okay? So instead of it being held by those muscles underneath, what we need is the thoracic spine to be able to release forwards, to be able to move forwards underneath the spine of the head. Okay? So it's not that we need to stretch the neck. It's not that we need to stretch the neck. What we need to do is not give the neck the job of carrying the weight of the head. And that happens when the upper spine comes through. And it's the hardest thing to do if you haven't got that going on because of breathing. And if you think about it, the lungs are within the rib cage, and it's another aspect of breathing that people don't really sort of talk about. Everyone talks about the diaphragm, but we've also got ribs that breathe, and the way that the ribs can release the breath can cause a release of pressure between the upper spine and the chest, not just the chest dropping, but between the upper spine and the chest, so that the release of the breath can allow the thoracic spine to come through closer to the central axis of the body. And it will be underneath the neck, underneath the head, so we get more of a chance to support the head from the ground up, but through the spine. And that's the key. We don't want to stretch the neck and the lumbars. We want to leave the neck and lumbars alone so they don't have to carry a weight, and then allow some sort of condition that allows the thoracic spine to come through. If you are busy stretching the poor thing, then that's not going to happen. All that tissue, when you forward bend, when you try and hang the head and hang the pelvis off the upper back, all that tissue overextends and stops being able to support you. Makes it less and less likely that you're going to be supported through the spine. Okay? This is a long session, this one, but I'll keep it going because it's an important subject. And that's another aspect of what we mean, I think, in the scaravelli inspired yoga approach to things. It's how I've understood it. The spine needs to be able to come together at the center of the thoracic spine behind you. So it's not lifting and leaning back. It's quite the opposite. It's not lifting your head and leaning back over it. if you do that enough, there might be enough compression for it to move past things. But it's more likely that you're going to be carrying your weight with your organs as you lean back and carrying your weight heavily against compressed intervertebral spaces. What we need is for the neck to be free of the job of carrying the weight of the head, for the lumbars to be free of the job of carrying the weight of the body, and for opening to happen because the upper spine comes together. And when the upper spine comes together, then you're in a place where the spine is at its central axis, and the release of the breath can allow extension in two directions. So we need to create the condition that stops the body pulling on the spine. The way we use the arms pulls on the thoracic spine and makes it round out more, generally speaking. And then when we push the thoracic spine back, and we do all our lifting from our necks and from our lower backs. What we need is an entirely different relationship to our environment, an entirely different relationship to our touch, an entirely different relationship to our space that allows us to release towards the center of things, and that center is your heart. That's the way I see things. Okay? Now, I know there's a lot of explanation, a lot of plastic bones going on. So I hope that got the idea across. I mean, quite frankly, if you really want to experience it, if it's not your paradigm, if that was, if that caught your interest, made sense, but you don't know what I mean in terms of what it feels like in your body, you've got to work with me or someone I work with that understands these things as clearly as this. And I'm sure there are some fantastic scaravelli inspired yoga teachers out there that understand this intuitively, but don't necessarily know how to get this thing across. The reason I have is because I am a heady person. I have worked it out. It has been my kind of mission to make sense of these things. It's one of my sort of first missives. I remember Pete Blackaby saying, if you can't explain things to people, then you're not teaching. All you're doing is showing what you can do. And I kind of agree with that. And those that can already do it will be able to do it with you, and that'll be a nice community thing. But if you want to help people, then I think we need to understand how to move from a state of complication towards a state of integration. And that's been my mission over the 20 years or so that I've been, up to 20 years I've been teaching, is how to make sense of this paradigmatically oppositional way of looking at things. And I hope that rather long session on today has gone a little way to clearing up the ideas. And if you want to experience how that goes, you need to work with me or someone that kind of understands this stuff. Okay. Talking of which, I am thinking of putting on a new online course. I was going to do weekly online classes where I just sort of randomly teach whoever turns up, but I don't think that would be satisfying enough for me. So I put out the idea of doing a live interactive online 6-week course, and I've got a whole series of ideas of what I can do with that, for dedicated practitioners, teachers, people that have been on the yoga path for a little while, maybe other body workers. I work with Tai Chi people. I work, whatever you do, as long as you're in the body mind sort of game, then these courses could work for you. And I want to get a good group of people that I can do this with, because I'll be recording them, and then at some point I'll get around to editing them and shrinking them down to make it a nice sort of condensed course that people can use for their forevermore. So if that's of interest, let me know. I'm thinking of starting sometime in October, and I've collected 7 or 8 names already. I need probably a dedicated group of 12 people to make it worth doing. That would be good. So let me know if you're interested, and I'll put you on the list. Other than that, what have we got? What have we got in here? Yes, next Saturday up in Glasgow. If you are wanting to come to a Yoga Solutions workshop, I'm in the Moment Centre, Graham's Place. It's a lovely venue. That'll be from 10:30 till 4:30 on Saturday the 21st. You can book for that online. And then the next Sunday in Brighton is the 13th of October, and that's the second Yoga Solutions subject, which is about making space. The one in Scotland is about being kind to the spine. So if you want to come along and experience something directly that relates to what I just showed you, then book for that on the 21st of September, next Saturday. Yeah, Sunday the 13th of October in Brighton. And then I'm up at Stretch on 26th of October. It's a Saturday afternoon workshop. Anyone, Stretch in London, in the I can't remember what the name of the road is. There's 2 studios. It's the one that's not near the market. It's the other one. Yeah, Stretch London. I think I've put a link to it on this video. And then the next one after that is the 3rd of November in Twickenham. For the Twickenham crew, so that's 11 till 5:30 on Sunday the 3rd, and then I have Friday I can't remember. It's a place. It's Haslemere. It's called. It's a village. My student Louisa Birtwell is hosting a workshop for me there. That is on Friday Excuse me, 1 second. That's a bit unprofessional, not knowing when that is. Yes, Friday the 22nd. And then that's in Haslemere with Louisa Birtwell hosting it for me. And then on Saturday, the 23rd, I'm in Angmering, which is hosted by Cindy Robbins, who's another alumni Acquaviva teacher and student. So, yes, if you're interested in the online stuff, get in touch. There are some online courses that are already recorded from the last time I did this, and they're about they're called a series called Embodied Living, and it's that's about taking yoga into day-to-day life. This series of online courses that I'm wanting to do is going to be about. Well, I'm going to take some fundamental themes of practice, and the first series, so that people can really get a handle on it, is going to be haptic intelligence. It's the haptic intelligence series, which I quite like the ring of, about how our direct quality of touch and the way we engage with our environment leads to a radical different experience within the body. And there are different types of touch, and the different ways of relating, and then they all have their own breathing patterns and other things. So I think the 6-week course is really the minimum to be on this subject. And I've got other subjects that I'll be following on from. It's an exciting project. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to getting a lovely group of intrepid explorers to come along with me. So anyway, that's enough from me. I've talked a lot today, a lot more than usual, but I hope you found it useful. If you did, feel free to spread this around wherever you like. I think this sort of understanding of things should be made worldwide available. That's my mission. And anything you can do to help is greatly appreciated. I have a donate page on my website that there's a link to below, and if you're a potential patron, you can get in touch, and I can tell you about my longer term projects in India and other things. So in the meantime, I am Marc J Acquaviva of the Acquaviva School of Yoga, signing off until the same time, same place next week. Lots of love to you all. Bye now.